In a shocking move, Jackson Arnold goes to Auburn. I don't love it.
You are Locked On College Football with Spencer McLaughlin, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your daily source to stay up to date with this, the greatest sport on planet Earth, whatever those stories may be. This episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel, where you can get a big return. New customers can place a $5 bet. You'll get 115 bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. There are so many impact wideouts in the portal, it's not even funny, folks, and you need to know about more later in today's show. And UNLV is going to keep being a playoff team with Dan Mullen as its head coach. But that is Zach Blackerby, Locked On Auburn. And the big news here, Zach, is Jackson Arnold is transferring from Oklahoma, where it didn't go as planned, shall we say. There were reports it could be Mississippi State. I'm sure they talked to him, and lo and behold, he's an Auburn Tiger. Here's where I don't love this, Zach. Okay. Hugh Freeze is facing increased pressure going into his third year after a regression year one to year two. And he brings in a quarterback who is a project, not an established commodity. Could this work out? Sure. I think this is incredibly risky from Hugh Freeze.
Yeah, and probably not plan A. I do think when you look at it, you can see like why he likes Jackson Arnold, and you think about what the ideal version of a Hugh Freeze offense could look like. RPO, he succeeded with athletic quarterbacks in the past. Jackson Arnold does have a big arm. I mean, I do think there's a lot of things you can look at, and you saw glimpses of it at times with Oklahoma last year. But as you said, I mean, Oklahoma, like Auburn, I mean, I think both teams' offenses were expected to be better than they were this past season. Was it all Jackson Arnold? No, we all know that. The offensive line was a major issue. He was throwing into, their 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th water boys that could run routes at wide receiver. There were a lot of issues at Oklahoma. But I'm with you. I'm with you in regards to there are still questions about this move. I get it, but was it plan A? Like, were they looking at other guys to enter the portal? I don't know. It's impossible for us to say, but I also will turn this back around on you. Like, who that's available to Hugh Freeze right now would be a better option for him to sign?
I think Malik Murphy has a higher floor.
I don't disagree with you. That's exactly what I said. I do think it's close, but I think it's Malik Murphy 1A. I think it's Jackson Arnold 1B, and they went with 1B.
Yeah, and the thing with Murphy is I don't think he's someone that comes in and gets Auburn to an SEC championship level immediately once. He's not a Cam Ward type. He is somebody whose floor is clearly high enough to win at the Power 4 level. I mean, Duke just had one of the most under-the-radar seasons in the country. They went 9-3. They played Miami closer than the score indicated. A big part of that is Malik Murphy set the single-season record for touchdown passes for a Duke Blue Devils quarterback. So that's a name that I talked about last week as, boy, that seems like it's a good fit. Not to have the magical season that Auburn fans are hoping Hugh Freeze is capable of, but to calm everything down, to remind the fans, to remind the donors and everyone that, hey, this can still work. I can still succeed here. Jackson Arnold feels like a gamble for a guy that doesn't have a ton of leeway.
Yeah. Hugh Freeze has to feel like his back is against the wall. I mean, if you go 5-7 again, it's hard to imagine him being the head coach at Auburn moving forward. And so, is this the guy that you want to attach your name to moving forward? As far as the guys that he had to pick from, I'm with you. I would have taken Malik first, but Jackson would have been second. And I do think Jackson Arnold's ceiling is significantly higher, not just higher. I think it's significantly higher than Malik Murphy's, but the floor argument I do think is important because we saw the ceiling of Auburn's offense at times this past season, but that's not why Auburn struggled. They struggled because the worst case scenario in a lot of situations that you don't think, oh, there's no way that happens a ton. It did happen a ton. And it happened in big moments over and over and over again. And in games that you should have won this past season.
So the question that I think comes about with Auburn making this move is, was it any port in a storm for quarterbacks? This transfer quarterback market, Zach, is not what it was last year. Right. Last year, you had Cam Ward on the move. You had Dylan Gabriel on the move. I don't see any of those guys. There's John Mateer at Washington State, who, by the way, isn't in the portal. He's reportedly had offers coming his way since the season was still going because of what he showcased this year, and certainly what Cam Ward did at Miami, I think is kind of a stepping stone moment for, hey, quarterbacks Washington State can make that jump and play really well. But he's not even in the portal, so you can't hold out hope for that if you're Hugh Freeze. And so you look at Jackson Arnold and say, he's an incredibly talented guy, but what were the other options going to be? If you didn't feel like Murphy was the right guy for whatever reason, or if you couldn't get it, like a lot of things going to get in quarterback from the high school ranks, and especially from the transfer portal. You've got to have the NIL right. You have to have the right pitch and all those things. What would the other option have been? For those like myself who say, I don't know if Jackson Arnold's the best option, what would be the next course of action?
I don't know. I mean, the other one I think is risky, and you just kind of sit and wait and you hope that one of these guys that are currently in the college football playoff, when they lose, you hope you have enough time to convince them to pick you. And Quinn Ewers is a name that's been tied to a lot of this, and apparently reports have come out that NFL scouts have said, hey, you'd be better off staying for another year, but also reports saying that like the Manning era is about to really kick off in Austin. And so a lot of folks, myself included, are expecting Quinn Ewers to play for another team next season. Like, okay, what if you wait for that and you want to swing for the fences for a Quinn Ewers, but what if he doesn't pick you? And all of a sudden Auburn's in a situation where, they lost Hank Brown. He's going to Iowa. They lost Holden Geriner. They lost Walker White. And so right now they're just sitting with Deuce Knight as a true freshman who tremendous ceiling, not ready to play as a true freshman. And so Auburn has to add another quarterback, at least one after getting Jackson Arnold.
Do you think that's why do you think that's why the Ashton Daniels reports came
100%,
out?
100%. And that was tied to Hank Brown 100%. If Hank Brown were to enter the portal, it was going to be Ashton Daniels was going to kind of be his replacement. And what I think is actually an ideal situation for a backup role for Auburn, a guy who's got 1 year left of eligibility, not expecting to be the starter. Maybe he just wants to go into the SEC to say that he did it. I'm sure Auburn's going to be competitive in his market when it comes to an NIL. Like, you can't be picky for a guy in a situation. A guy who's played a lot of football that can mentor younger quarterbacks that doesn't want to play and has 1 year left of eligibility. Like, I don't think you can be picky in that situation. Now, if he was in a situation where he'd have to play, that'd be bad and potentially really unfortunate. But do they go out and like make that official and tie him down, or do they say, hey, let's hold off and let's swing for the fences and let's see who drops out of the CFP a little earlier than some people may expect, and if there is a larger name quarterback that enters the portal?
One name
that'd be expensive.
It would. It would be incredibly expensive, but so too would paying Hugh Freeze's buyout if it doesn't go well next season. So the name that pops into my head immediately when you said playoff quarterbacks that could lose is Kevin Jennings at SMU. But Kevin Jennings put out a video earlier today that said, I'm back. I'm not going anywhere. However, there is a guy behind him who started the previous year and had a lot of success in Preston Stone. I'm not saying it's a dynamite option. I'm just saying if you look at the quarterback market right now, Preston Stone is probably a top 5 transfer quarterback available.
Yeah, I still think when you look at a Preston Stone and you look at a Jackson Arnold, not crazy different when it comes to experience, and the upside of Arnold is significantly higher. And that's kind of the same thing for, like, there's an argument against every quarterback that's in the portal right now, for the most part, as far as like that's going to be that level that you're looking at for Auburn and Hugh Freeze. So sure, but I don't think that really fixes Auburn's situation. I don't think Preston Stone changes the calculus with how we talk about the Auburn Tigers if they were to pursue him.
So much fun stuff yet to unfold. The portal's still open for about another 2 weeks or so, not quite 2
but
weeks.
it's longer for playoff teams.
That's
and I
true.
think that's worth noting as we talk about this, because Quinn Ewers is going to be fascinating, and I'm sure there's going to be other guys, and maybe not quarterbacks, but we'll see. We'll see. Boise State, interesting. Is Clemson paying people? Like, what does Klubnik do? Does he go to the league? I don't know. But this isn't ending when the portal ends. This is going to go on longer than that.
So too will Locked on Auburn. Zach Blackerby is the host of that particular show. And Zach, I love the time as always, my friend.
Dude, you're the best. Love you long time.
That's what UNLV's saying to Dan Mullen right now. You're the best. Love you long time. Thanks for coming down. Guess what? I think that can be a seamless transition to staying as a playoff team.
No.
Dan Mullen, he doesn't like it. I do. I'll tell you why next. First, let's talk about FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app, it gives you everything that you need to place live bets on the NFL, all in one place, by the way. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, you can view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. FanDuel.com, that's the place to go. Playoff games are this week. Yeah, big time pressure for a lot of different coaches, Ryan Day. Do you think you know how that game's going? Do you think Ohio State's winning by 10 or more points? Go bet the Buckeyes at FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Much like Wicked, Dan Mullen is back and better than ever. Well, I mean, that depends on who you ask and what your perspective is. Heck, I'm not even telling you that's my perspective on the movie. What I am telling you is that Dan Mullen can do great things at UNLV. I love this hire. I'm a huge fan of this hire for two reasons. Number one, Dan Mullen has never failed anywhere that he has been. His career coaching record's 103-61. He wasn't run out of Florida because he wasn't winning games. He made an SEC championship game. He went to New Year's Six bowl games. He did those things. They just deemed themselves capable of finding someone better. Yeah, that's going great. 7-5, woohoo! Everything. The fourth year, it'll all work out, right? So Dan Mullen won at Mississippi State. Dan Mullen won at Florida. Now Dan Mullen goes to UNLV. So I am a fan for UNLV bringing in somebody who has proven himself capable at two different spots, which have different respective standings in their conference. What I mean by that is Mississippi State is not, in theory, as easy of a place to win as Florida. Florida's a better job than Mississippi State, but he won at both. And remember, he had Mississippi State ranked inside the top 5, number 1 back in the day. So this is a guy who's been around college football for a while. He does not appear, though he's slightly on the older side, he's not Mac Brown, Bill Belichick, outdated sort of feel. He doesn't have the vibe of somebody that doesn't understand modern college football, can't adapt to it, or isn't going to sink 10 teeth into the transfer portal and NIL, which is, of course, incredibly crucial. More on that in just a moment. So that's the first reason I like it. The second reason I like it is I'm just happy for UNLV. I really am. They have not been relevant in football my entire life. Barry Odom gets a reclamation coaching job there. He's going to Purdue now. We'll see who he hires on his staff. But UNLV hasn't been good. Barry Odom just did a heck of a job. 2 years in a row in the Mountain West Championship game, 1 game away from the college football playoff. Dan Mullen said in his opening statement, they were a game away this year, and I expect to have them there. And by the way, I expect Dan Mullen to be able to succeed because Barry Odom went there and succeeded, and he was not as successful at Missouri as Mullen was at either of his 2 stops in the SEC. So for that reason, the brand shift, the identity of UNLV football is doing a 180. This is not a hire UNLV could have made 5 years ago. If you want to compare this to Mac Brown, there are not a lot of similarities there, but there is the coach who has coached in the past, who was a TV analyst. Someone of that caliber 5 years ago, 3 years ago even, isn't taking a look at UNLV. They're just not. Dan Mullen's a big name in college football. Why'd he look at UNLV? Because Barry Odom just showed you the roadmap. You can win here. And with the transfer portal, you can bring in players. You can get guys. Their best players this year, a couple of big-time transfers. Ricky White, wide receiver, he was a transfer. Haj Malik Williams, he was a one-time transfer. Now those guys are gone. So roster building is going to be difficult. The impact guys from this year's UNLV team, they're leaving. So I don't know yet. The portal is currently open. There's another window in the spring as well. I don't know what sort of team Dan Mullen's going to be able to put on the field. I don't know if year one they're back in the conference championship and pushing for a spot in the 12-team playoff. I do know that all the tools are there to build it and sustain it at that sort of level, because that's what Barry Odom has done each of the last 2 years. So the foundation, a growing swell of support amongst UNLV fans, that's what Barry Odom has left behind. But it is going to be a bit of a rebuild, a bit of a restart, perhaps, for UNLV roster-wise. Now, here's the interesting part of this, the really interesting part. Do you know the name Brennan Marion? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. Some people will see Brennan Marion as having been passed over for this head coaching opportunity. He may even feel that way. He's justified in feeling that because he has been there with the go-go offense for UNLV over the last couple of years. They've had a variety of quarterbacks. They've all been able to succeed. And Brennan Marion was right there. Brennan Marion has been a head coach before in his past, but UNLV decided to go externally. The question becomes, what happens with Marion, who is seen as an up-and-comer, understandably so, in the college football coaching ranks? He has got a unique offense. It's got its own name. He's got his own chain with go-go on it. You know why? Because there's nothing like the go-go offense in college football. And so if you are looking at an offensive coordinator hire and you're Dan Mullen, boy, you'd love to keep Brennan Marion around. Barry Odom hasn't made that hire yet. He said he's looking at a variety of candidates. Some of them are coaches that are on bowl-eligible teams right now. That kind of makes me think Marion isn't going to Purdue, or he'd be there already. That's just my suspicion. Maybe that changes. But people often assume that the dynamic between a head coach and a coordinator is always really good and they're going to be tight. No, not always the case. Can be the case. Often is the case. Not always the case. Just because two guys work together and have success doesn't mean that wherever that head coach goes, he's going to bring that particular coordinator with him. Sometimes there's a guy who they're attached at the hip. They're going everywhere together. Brennan Marion doesn't appear to be that guy. So if he doesn't get hired as Purdue's offensive coordinator and he doesn't get hired as UNLV's offensive coordinator, somebody's going to snatch that guy up. Somebody is going to look at what he did and the innovation he brings on the offensive side of the ball and say, we would like to have you be our offensive coordinator. What are your salary requirements? We would like to make sure that you can go coach our offense now. So the staff component for Dan Mullen, I think, is entirely fascinating because you don't see that a whole heck of a lot where a coach leaves and an offensive coordinator, would he stay behind to stay in the coordinator role? Brennan Marion's been a head coach before. He has been ascending in the coaching ranks. Seems like a guy to me, based on those indicators, who wants to be a head coach, who's capable of being a head coach again. But remember, the coaching carousel has not entirely filled itself in. We haven't seen every head coaching vacancy in college football come open that will come open, or every coordinator move that will take place. But we've seen a lot of them. They're getting filled quickly because you have to act on this transfer portal while it is still open so you can build a roster and start to compete as quickly as possible, because that's the messed up college football calendar world that this sport has created for everybody. So fascinating to see what happens there. But Dan Mullen has spent the last few years as an analyst. Sure, that's some time away. Remember, he's coached in over 160 college football games. I don't think when he takes the field for the first time on Saturday next year, whoever his quarterback's going to be, I would watch for the name. There, no insider intel. I'm just saying from a fit standpoint. Mentioned him earlier in the show. Preston Stone at SMU. Watch for that name. Watch for that name. See if he winds up at UNLV. There are plenty of quarterbacks out there. Fernando Mendoza at Cal is in the transfer portal. Stone, as I mentioned, there are guys. Billy Edwards Jr., who was the starter at Maryland this year. There are names. They are capable. I imagine that's where Dan Mullen, who is an offensive guy, I imagine that's where he is going to start. But the rest of the roster matters as well. Jackson Woodard's the Mountain West Defensive Player of the Year. Ricky White is probably going to be playing on Sundays here very shortly. You lose your quarterback, you lose your head coach, You lose your top wide receiver. You lose the Mountain West Defensive Player of the Year. That's a lot. That's a lot. Good news for Dan Mullen. The transfer portal is open, and there are a lot of players in it. There are a lot of talented players in the portal. So UNLV suddenly looks a lot different as a job than it did a couple of years ago. Barry Odom deserves a lot of respect for that, but Dan Mullen saw what he did and said, I think I can do that as well. And maybe he's ambitious. Maybe he leaves after a couple of years just like Barry Odom. But if he maintains that level of success, I think that still makes it worth it for UNLV. Speaking of talented players in the transfer portal, there are more wide receivers going in every day, it seems, than even I can keep up with, who can go and make an impact on Power 4 conference title contenders. One of them found a home, Micah Hudson, to Texas A&M. I love that move for the Aggies. I'll tell you why next. It's that time of year. The college football playoff is back, and with the newly expanded 12-team format, it's guaranteed to be bigger and better than ever, bringing you all the hard-hitting and high-flying excitement that you love. We've got home playoff games this weekend. TNT Sports coverage of the college football playoff begins December 21st, starting with the college football playoff kickoff show presented by AT&T at 11 a.m. Eastern, leading into our first matchup, SMU battling Penn State at noon. Then, the Clemson Tigers look to upset the Texas Longhorns in a showdown at 4 p.m. Eastern. Don't miss a moment of the action. Watch the college football playoff presented by Allstate live on TNT, True TV, TBS, and Max. Former five-star Micah Hudson goes from Texas Tech, where he spent one season, to Texas A&M. Spencer, his numbers are not impressive. He didn't even have 200 yards receiving this year. Yes, I am fully aware. That is not how I'm judging this particular move. Hudson isn't going to be, in all likelihood, the number one wide receiver. That's per Locked On Aggies host Andrew Stefaniak and friend of the program, an overall cool dude. However, he is likely going to be the number two guy. So the interesting thing about this particular dynamic with a guy like Micah Hudson, who coming out of high school has got all this hype, all the five-star ratings and all the attention and whatnot, and oh my gosh, he goes to Texas Tech and it doesn't work out. You in your head might go, well, I mean, that means he's not as good as we thought he was. No, that's not what it means at all. That means that he wasn't ready to reach his full potential as a true freshman. That means he wasn't able to find a system that works for him at Texas Tech, or that they just had other talented and more experienced players who were ahead of him on the depth chart. Fact check true across the board in a couple different receiving spots. So Hudson goes to Texas A&M, and there are two reasons that I love this move. Number one, Marcel Reed is somebody who, as a runner, is incredibly dynamic. And Texas A&M went 8-4 this year. By the way, I consider that a success. Not just because I predicted them 8-4 before the season, but because based on what they've been in the last several years, the level that they played at, the games that they lost to Notre Dame and to Texas and whatnot, I don't expect you in year one to be at that sort of level. I do expect you to address serious weaknesses. Against Texas in that big rivalry game, the environment was off the charts awesome. Everywhere you looked, you saw screaming loud fans. It was as great and as beautiful as I hoped it would be, and the game was ugly. I mean, it was ugly. Why? Texas A&M couldn't score. So when Marcel Reed came into the LSU game, caught the Tigers by surprise. I mean, he's running all over the field. Wait, why is this guy in the game? We were ready for Connor Wigman. They were ready for Connor Wigman. And then Marcel Reed changed the game. Well, then everybody got film on Marcel Reed and realized, okay, here's what he does. Here's how you counter that sort of thing. And suddenly, he's not lighting the world on fire every week. He's still a tremendously talented guy. But where does he most need to develop? As a passer. He's there as a runner. You see the speed. You see the instincts, the playmaking ability. That's all fine. That's already there. What he has to do is be allowed to grow and flourish for Colin Klein as offensive coordinator as a passer. If Texas A&M is going to reach an SEC championship game, is going to make the college football playoff, you are not going to be able, see Alabama, for instance, whose passing game was great and explosive early this season. And then once those plays were kind of taken away, they didn't have a counterpunch with the passing game. The offensive line wasn't that great. You have to be a little bit more multiple on offense. And so Texas A&M brings in a guy in Micah Hudson who is a complementary piece. Doesn't have to be the number one receiver. Maybe that's how he was hyped up at Texas Tech. It's not what he was, but that's not what Texas A&M needs him to be either. And everything that you heard about him coming out of high school is still true. It's still there. The talent's there. You just have to unlock it. They're trying to do, in some respects, what Oregon did with former Texas A&M wide receiver Evan Stewart, who showed a couple of glimpses here and there. He hasn't been Oregon's leading receiver, but he's shown why he was a five-star recruit, why the NFL still likes him throughout the course of the season. Go watch the Ohio State game if you want the best example of that. That's what they're trying to do with Hudson, is they're trying to say, okay, we don't need you to be a number one, got a guy who can do that. But if we're going to allow our quarterback the chance to succeed, the chance to develop, we're going to go out and address a legitimate, serious weakness here, which is we got to find more receivers who we feel like can play, they feel like he can play. That's the first thing. Second thing, I kind of touched on it. I am just such a huge fan. It sounds obvious, but it isn't to every coaching staff, apparently. When you've got a weakness, go attack it in the offseason. It's just when you don't have to go out and make changes. Don't be afraid. Don't say, well, we got to do this. We got to do. No, just go. Just do it. Just make it happen. If you're weak, Brian Kelly on the defensive side of the ball, Lincoln Riley, go get a new defensive coordinator. They did. They were better. It hasn't all been fixed yet in either spot, but it's better. So I'm a fan. I'm a fan of that move for Texas A&M, and that's just one potential impact receiver. Here are two other names you should know. I'll give you three just for that. And again, I could go on and on because they're not just wide receivers in the portal. These are guys who can be game changers for an offense if they get into the right role. Micah Hudson fits that description, by the way. Eric Singleton Jr. is the highest rated transfer wide receiver available according to 24/7 Sports. He's crystal ball to Ole Miss. So that doesn't automatically mean he's going there. It does mean that Ole Miss is about to lose a lot. And what has Lane Kiffin been dubbed before? The portal king. Brought in the number one portal class last year. Wouldn't surprise me. Singleton comes from Georgia Tech. He's 5'11", 190 pounds. And let me tell you, he could step in and be the number one receiver for Ole Miss right away. They have a bunch of other talented receivers as well. But I'm just telling you, that guy, you're going to notice him really quickly. Deuce Robinson was a tight end coming out of high school. He's kind of settled into a wide receiver. He's 6'6". You know a lot of 6'6" wide receivers? You know? Are they out there? They overly abundant? Yeah, I didn't think so. Last one I want to talk about today that is going to find a new home. He's been looking at a variety of places, including Oklahoma, which I'm pretty sure for their bowl game, I don't think they even know who they're throwing the football to. Every person that has ever played wide receiver at Oklahoma has entered. Hollywood Brown is in the transfer portal, okay? That's what's happening in Norman at the moment. They're looking at Nyziah Hunter from Cal. Freshman season, 5 touchdowns, around 600 yards through the air. This dude popped onto the scene. And Cal, who hired Auburn legend Brian Harsin to be their offensive coordinator, is looking for a new quarterback because their freshman flipped to Oregon and their starter the last 2 years, Fernando Mendoza, he hits the transfer portal. We'll see where he winds up because he's going to start somewhere. I think UCLA's a good fit. But Nyziah Hunter, one of their top receivers, promising guy, he's into the transfer portal too. And so Hunter is a guy that has got the body type to do a little bit of everything. That's what he can be a guy who lines up in the slot. He can be a yards after catch. He can be a contested catch sort of guy. Every single weapon that you want at the wide receiver, Nyziah Hunter can be that. He's 6'2", 210 pounds. He didn't always look 210 pounds when you watched him on TV, but he's got hands. He can run routes. He can jump up in the air. Guy's the whole package. Does he go somewhere and be a number one wide receiver? I think he can be. I really think he can be. I mean, in that Cal offense, there were times where he was the best receiver on the field. He seems like someone who is poised to make that sophomore leap. Oklahoma needs wide receivers. Nick Anderson in the portal. Don't know what's happening with Deion Burks yet, but they need guys on the perimeter. That would be a phenomenal fit. But these wide receivers, it's the most abundant position in the transfer portal where you can get high-level impact guys, and there are just a lot of them. Just from a pure volume standpoint, there are a lot, but from a depth of talent standpoint, there are a lot. This isn't the first time I've done an impact wide receivers transfer segment on this very show in the last 5 days. Why? It's a real thing. So we'll see where these guys end up. They're going to find new homes, and those new homes are going to love them. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. And until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.